first?
Oh, yeah, we should probably.
Have the formal beginning of the meeting?
Commissioner Nacita?
Aye.
Commissioner,
Here. Sorry.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Roth? Here. Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Yates?
Here.
Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
And Chair Walters? Here.
Okay, now I'll go again. So included in your packet is a copy of the agenda for today. And then also included is a copy of the City Commission goals that relate to economic development and urban renewal, followed by an excerpt called Projects. This is from the 10th Amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan, which was passed in 2007. And that's the probably the most comprehensive list of all the urban renewal projects that we have in one location. You can see there's 14 projects listed. And following that, we have Section 400, which is also part of the 10th Amendment to the Urban Renewal Plan. That's on page 11. And that's a listing of the objectives and goals of the Urban Renewal District. And we provide this information because it provides a background of where we are so far. And I think as we get into the discussion, we'll want to refer to those to see if these goals or projects are inadequate or need changing. And then the last thing that we have attached is a submittal that was made by Mr. Edgar related to some of the issues he felt were important to this goal setting session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette Launer. She was here, I think it was a couple of months ago, and spoke to you about urban renewal. I think it was Urban Renewal 101. Mm-hmm. And so...
we're advancing, I assume, to 102 or 103.
Yeah, this is our 101A.
No.
So you jumped at 202?
Okay, 202, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. We're jumping ahead.
You're jumping ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan. As Dan said, I'm Jeanette Launer, and I'm an urban renewal attorney, as they say, for my sins. And I was asked to assist in this goal-setting work session of the Urban Renewal Commission. And the first thing that I thought would be appropriate was to put together some kind of an agenda, which you all have. And I wanted to go over this a little bit just to explain why it is the way it is. And then, you know, as you all work through this or want to make any changes to it, you can understand the purpose. Introduction and goals of the workshop is pretty, thank you, pretty self-explanatory. I'm sure that you all know each other really well, but I don't know you very well, and I would like to know you a little bit better. But also, I think it's important to know what people are bringing to the goals that we're going to try to set today. You know, where are they coming from on urban renewal as a concept? I proposed in number 2 some 4 goals for this Urban Renewal Commission workshop. It's pretty ambitious, although it really depends upon how much discussion you want to have about what has gone before. Because Oregon City has an amazing amount of economic development strategy and goal setting that has happened over the past 10 years. A lot more in connection to the urban renewal strategies than most cities or counties that I've ever worked with, quite frankly. So you all have already invested immensely in economic development goal setting as a city, strategic goals for the Urban Renewal Commission in relation to those economic development goals for the city. And I think that it's important that everybody understand those, how the Urban Renewal Commission has been perceived as assisting with those, and then move on into, well, how do we actually implement those projects which would be supportive of the goals. Obviously, everybody has a chance to shoot at these goals and or add some. Then I thought what we would do is we would break out each of the goals that we've agreed to for the workshop and go through them in some more detail. A is important because I think that the big picture needs to be clearly understood as you all work through what it is that you want to do and what it is that you can do. So that was the purpose of what is the role of the Urban Renewal Commission. Understanding where you've been always helps, and Dan is going to assist there. And then taking a look at the current goals that you have in your urban renewal plan, and determine whether those are still, in your minds anyway, the right goals for this commission in the light of all of that economic development strategy work that's gone before. And then D is probably the fun part, in the sense of, if you like building stuff or making things more beautiful or improving the actual physicalness of your city, that's what the Urban Renewal Commission will actually be able to accomplish. So that's why I put it together that way. The idea being, we start at kind of the broad base and framework. We move to what the Urban Renewal Commission has as its current goals, and then we move into the implementation part. So with that, maybe we could just back up a little bit, and if you all would indulge me as I suggested for introductions, I would be very interested in knowing why you're an Urban Renewal Commissioner, if you're an independent one. If you're part of the City Council, you were drafted. But,
Voluntarily drafted.
Voluntarily drafted. Or, if you're if you're a city councilor, you may have some particular thoughts about how urban renewal fits into the bigger job that you have. So I at least would start, if that's okay. I already said I was Jeanette Lahner. I'm a lawyer. That's not my sentence, because that's not how I define myself. But the most important thing is that I'm a fly fisherman. And if you know anything about fly fishing, it means that you believe in solving problems using skill and a lot of luck. So I don't know who would like to maybe indulge the introductions. Maybe Nancy as the chair. You want to go?
Sure. My name is Nancy Walters, and I would say my biggest influence is being from Hawaii. I'm really influenced by the culture there, and I guess that's enough for now.
Why are you on the Urban Renewal Commission?
Because I want to make a positive difference, and
My handwriting's here.
also learn something along the way.
Next.
And make a positive difference. Thank you.
This is why I'm not a school teacher. No chalkboard for me. Okay. Anybody want to jump in? Next. Go that way.
I was drafted.
Okay.
But the reason I ran for city commission partially is to the concerns about the appearance of this neck of the woods in terms of the blighted areas we have. Also, parks and recreation and natural areas have always been a particular interest to me, and I try to build them in where possible into our discussions.
Okay. Next.
Including recreation, too.
Just go on, Rocky.
Rocky Smith, and I am a school teacher. And I was born in Oregon City. It's pretty good.
You sure you don't want to just...
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
And I also am on the city commission, but one of the many reasons I ran for city commission was because of some concerns about the way urban renewal money was being spent and how some of those decisions were being made. I do believe that urban renewal is a very important tool, but I don't think we've been using it correctly. So that's mainly that.
I'm Paul Edgar, and I'm a kind of the citizen representative of citizen at large. I'm a retired businessman, property developer person. Been in corporate business worlds for all my life. I understand financial sides and trying to make sure that we make some smart financial decisions about how we utilize the money and actually make things happen that are positive. And I have been very concerned that we have not necessarily hit the nail on the head with our efforts and our money.
We use TIF as, because it's the major, obviously, money that is unique to the commission, so that's what
Brian Shaw, representing neighborhood. And having been on the Historic Review Board for about 10 years, I got to see how, when things are done right, it actually does make a big influence on the city. And when this urban renewal position came up, I thought I could probably be an addition to that to help some of these blighted areas out, and actually learn about urban renewals. I kind of went along. It's kind of a work in progress here, so so I thought that.
First point up here for learn.
Yes. I think we've all kind of, and it will be a continuing learning process here. I think so.
You commented representing the neighborhoods or representing neighborhoods. I'm not sure I know what that means. Is this a particular seat that is usually occupied by a neighborhood representative?
Yeah, we actually have 2 or 3 neighborhoods represented here. Kanema.
No, 2.
Okay.
McLaughlin and Park Place.
Okay.
And I'm at large for the rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then hello. Your comment about the Historic Preservation Commission. You think that they are doing some things right in terms of the investments that they're making?
That's correct.
So we're back to this idea about positive use of the money, high impact
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's those wireless microphones.
I think it was just to add to it. High impact.
I'm Kathy. Am I?
You are, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Roth. Can you hear me?
I don't have to go over the mic at all.
It doesn't seem to
Okay. Well, I'm Kathy Roth, and I'm one of the commissioners. And basically, I see Oregon City as being on the precipice of something really fantastic, and I want to be part of that.
What should we call that? Part of big
The big
steps,
leap.
or Big leap.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Graham Peterson. I'm a commercial real estate broker by trade, and I'm the representative for the Chamber of Commerce. So I joined because I'm not the best at saying no, but also I guess the other side of that is I have a lot of schooling background from urban planning, so I'm really interested in economic development, how urban planning, urban renewal ties into that, and livability. And I was born in Oregon City, so I've seen some of the changes, the great changes, and some of also maybe what I would argue some of the lack of changes. So I wanted to be a part of kind of the big picture and pushing things forward in a positive direction. I could be part of the big leap, yeah. Sure.
As long as we're not
You end
left.
up having a theme for this, you know, logo with people. Making sure it's not a precipice, but, okay. I don't know whether you go by James or Jim.
Either. Jim Nacita, Commission President, member of the City Commission, obviously. Therefore, I'm on the Urban Renewal Commission. Two things. One is I'm very interested in historic preservation. I was also on the Historic Review Board. Had a background back in Michigan over 20, 25-year span doing historic preservation, organizing, community organizing, put a street in Detroit on the National Register of Historic Places. Got the ball rolling here in Oregon City on our demolition denial and demolition by neglect ordinance. Very interested. I have an urban planning degree, master's degree. Very interested in urban development and urban redevelopment finance, especially historic preservation financing tools. And I'm also very, very, very passionate about urban planning and urban design in particular. I have a library of urban design books, and one of the reasons I moved to Oregon City was a conviction that it has the natural setting with its basalt shelves and its water, Willamette, Clackamas Rivers, Clackamas Cove, for some just enviable urban design and architecture, and good architecture. I don't think we've achieved that, and I want to see the city's processes for development and design improved so that we can make better decisions on both development and urban design and architecture.
And when you talk about improving the development processes in the Urban Renewal Commission context, can you be more? I have to admit some ignorance here. I assume Oregon City has a design commission.
No.
They do not have
No.
You do no design review of
The
major structures.
the Historic Review Board, in part,
Okay.
can serve as a design review, but only within the districts. Otherwise, we don't.
But we have a planning commission. that
Planning
does that.
Commission to some extent.
But as far as other cities that actually have design review boards, we don't have that.
I'm trying to jam this all on one sheet, so I'm making it more of a mess.
So speak briefly, Betty.
Mine will be ever so brief. Betty Mum, Oregon City Commission. So I was also drafted onto the Urban Renewal Board. I was interested in urban renewal just to learn about the process and to help improve blighted areas, and was hopeful to move a couple of big projects through at some point.
And wanting to move big projects through because, I mean, what do you see as
Because
the
it'll-
advantage of a big project?
It would have brought great jobs to our area. It would have improved a huge blighted area.
I assume you're referring to
Yes.
the rivers.
Yes.
I'm Phil Yates. I own a business in town. I'm a lawyer by training. I'm interested in urban renewal because I think Oregon City's got, I'm not going to make you write anything. I'm going to point out the ones that I bought into. Make a difference at the top there is the big one. I really feel like I'd like to contribute to any community I live in. It's sort of a civic obligation, I feel. And I think the big leap is what I'm more interested in for this city than anything with the Blue Heron opportunities. Main reason I've gotten involved here, though, is I've been concerned about the process, how the decisions are made, these big projects that Betty is in favor of. I'm not so much in favor of. I'm much more inclined to favor urban renewal for things that don't involve picking winners and losers and just doing urban design in a general manner rather than large, specific, individual developer type projects.
Okay, so I did this because I think what you're going to find is when we start looking at what do you already have? What do you have for your economic development goals as a city? What do you have for your urban renewal goals in the urban renewal plan and the purposes of the urban renewal, of having an urban renewal program? I think what you're, these parts are obviously very personal, but the parts that talk about improving appearance, eliminating blight, doing natural area improvements and recreation, obviously how you spend your money to get to those goals is part of the whole game. The big leap, I think, is an interesting concept because it is, the question becomes, what is it that you are trying to accomplish? And again, you already have a bunch of background things that should help guide that. Obviously, when I think when everybody thinks of Oregon City, they think of this, as being such an amazing resource. And I heard from Nancy before the meeting about her interest certainly in improving the development processes, and as projects are undertaken, focusing on these kinds of things that are important to citizens in addition to these kinds of things. Not necessarily to their exclusion, but rather to have a full package that meets what it is that the goals of these projects will be. So that I did this because I thought it was important to see, as we talk about what you already have and what you might want to have, to just see kind of how aligned I think you probably are, which is a good thing. You don't have a whole big long way to go. One of the questions that I had, and this actually relates to process. I'm afraid to sit down because it's going to scream again, isn't it? One of the things that I think, I don't know how you all do business as a commission. And so if this is purely a workshop and all you're trying to do is talk about things and put things out on the table and not actually come to any kind of decisions or anything like that, we probably don't need to talk about process. But if you want to come out of this workshop or later workshops that you all may decide you want to do with a very firm direction, then, the idea of, do you make decisions always by consensus? Do you make decisions by a majority vote? How do you do that? So I think for now we can set that question aside because I'm not sure how far we'll get this afternoon and evening to be making actual decisions. But I think it's something important to think about because you are all very diverse, which is what actually is totally terrific. I must say that I found it fascinating that the Urban Renewal Board, first of all, is so large. This is an extraordinarily large Urban Renewal Board. And secondly, that all of the city commissioners are on the board, but with others. Usually what you see is a smaller board that has, say, 2 city commissioners and 3 citizens, or 3 and 5, or something, or 3 and 3, or something like that. So I think that how you do business is something that, we need to work through, maybe not with me, but, as you move forward. So I proposed in number 2 some goals that we would aspire to this afternoon and evening. And this may be more than what you want to do, or there might be things that are really missing. I have been made aware, Paul, of your thing, your submission. I really appreciated that because it certainly, I think, feeds into when we talk about implementing steps as to, what about these projects, how it moves the ones we want to do with it. So,
Excuse me,
really
Jeanette?
appreciated that.
Have we covered 1C sufficiently for everyone? Because I'm wondering if maybe we're talking about.
Oh, I think that if anybody wants to, I guess I kind of heard part of the answer here, but if you have something additional that people want to, what do you want to achieve as an urban renewal commissioner that you'd like to add to this list?
Well, I'm just wondering, in terms of what we accomplished tonight, because these are pretty general things, and then there's more specific things we could cover, and I don't know if this is the right venue for that. Because I have some specific things that I'd like to list. If we're talking about Paul's list, I don't want it to take place in a vacuum of my list and everybody else's list.
Well, let me be more clear. 1C was not meant to be what do you want to achieve tonight. It was meant to be, do you have any particular things that drive you as an urban renewal commissioner? And I guess I heard the answer in what people responded here. That you're interested in the urban design stuff. You're interested in improving the development process.
So can I add to that list then?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I want more transparency, accountability, and responsibility. And I want better communications.
Okay, this was the why you're around. Let's okay. So, how would you characterize this as?
So I'm just kind of talking about 1C, about
Okay.
what do we want to achieve, and not tonight, but just what do we want to achieve in general. So that would be my top goal.
All right, say it again. I before E, C.
It's good.
So you said transparency
Accountability and responsibility.
from and to whom?
Protect the public interest.
Accountability, and excuse me, what was the last one?
Responsibility.
Okay. Big concepts, obviously. I mean, I would think that anybody who's in a public position would seek these things. So if we were looking at these, and maybe this then moves some of these things into another part of the agenda, because it seems to me that, for example, transparency and accountability by the commission to the public, by the staff to the commission, all those kinds of things. You're really talking about how you do business, how the commission does business, and that is not on this agenda.
Well,
But it's certainly...
I think it is, actually.
Okay.
The role, it's 2A, 1C. 2A is agree on the role of the commission in Oregon City economic development, and I agree with Nancy. I think that accountability and transparency has been an issue, but I really think it's really what the role of the commission has been. In the past, this commission, under Larry at least, would say this is what we're going to do, and they cut a deal in the back room, and they'd announce it at an Urban Renewal Commission meeting. It would get voted on, and Larry would run and try to do a major development out of his office. And I'd like to see that changed. I'd like to see the city out of the development business, basically, the way it has been, at least, since I've been around in this town the last few years. And part of that is my concern with this accountability thing and transparency, where these deals are cut, where we don't even get to see the deal for years, when they are spending millions of our dollars behind, I'm not asserting anything really necessarily is going wrong, other than I don't have a great deal of confidence in.
I don't feel that I have sufficient knowledge to be responsible.
I don't have a great deal of confidence in their ability to execute the plans that have been developed. That's my concern. So I think a lot of it has to do with openness and that kind of thing. I think it's at the core of what this issue is, too. By the way.
Because we transferred out of the goals, I'm not going to respond to any of that. I think it reflects different attitudes that have come to play, and that's fine. I'd like to read a letter I received, not pertaining to this meeting, but I think it kind of triggers my feeling in terms of many of the things that were there on the goals. Howdy, Doug Neely, Mayor of Oregon City. My name is Clay Benson from Austin, Texas. My wife and I traveled over 3,000 miles to come and see the covered wagons at the end of the Oregon Trail. When we got there, the place was closed. we decided to tour the rest of Oregon City and the downtown area. Dear Mayor, I will say this. Your city is absolutely the end of the trail. I've never in my life visited such a sick city. You need to take the bull by the horns and take control of your commission. Well, that's not possible. And create some kind of growth industry to put the city back on the map. As we were sitting and eating lunch at the Dairy Queen, some folks overheard us talking and suggested that we go to Seattle, Washington to see the Space Needle so our trip would not be a complete flop. I will say this, we have never driven so far in our life just to be disappointed. Mr. Mayor, good luck on your journey. Thank you, the Benson family. Till we meet again. This was sent about a month ago. A lot of these pieces actually reflect things within the urban renewal district. We have the covered wagons that are not a destination site. We have the Ermitage house that is going to pieces. We have part of our urban renewal district extends into the Blue Heron area, which, as you know, the mill has closed. There's some nice things down on Main Street and about 4-block area that have been great, that have been happening, but there's an extensive area for which this has not happened. One of the major things that are listed in previous goals, but I think it's one of the things that are mentioned in the setting up of an urban renewal district, is dealing with blighted areas. These are the kinds of things that have been characterized in terms of we shouldn't be involved in development issues. I don't know how you deal with blighted areas unless you develop them. I don't know how else to do it. But the point is, this is the perception of somebody that made this trip all this way. And many of the issues that they deal with are things that are characterized within the urban renewal district. And I think there's something that every one of us can feel about this letter that makes a connection. And I think if you're going to tear back into the previous administration or this administration or anything of that nature, we're not going to go very far. So transparency, accountability, responsibility, these are things I think everybody on the commission wants to deal with. I don't think these are issues at this time. I think the issues are how we deal with these issues. And we can go back and get in a row about who is responsible for what when. It won't do much good. That's just my comment.
Well, I think I feel that maybe there's a little misunderstanding because I had no intention of referring to any particular individuals. I'm just saying that in order for us to get to a better place, we need to have a level of transparency, accountability, and responsibility in all of our efforts that have not been there in the past.
It was in reference to what Mr. Gates said, actually.
Okay. Well,
referring back to the previous administration and so forth.
Okay, so getting back to the goals discussion and our facilitator here.
Well, let me make a comment. I mean, obviously, you all have a lot of history, but but I think the point here is that you all are on this commission to do something, and if you look at those goals that many of you were willing to put ticks next to as agreeing to as the goal or a set of goals, you actually have a lot in common. And being personal about what has gone before will be completely irrelevant to me because I don't know these people. So from my standpoint, it seems like the best way we could move forward is to, I think we do need to have some framework to the past, and that was B, I think. To go back and say, okay, where have we been, what do we got, because you can't really work off of it until you know what you got. But also to avoid, except to the extent it is instructional to something you want to accomplish, avoid, dwelling on mistakes and past controversies. I think that if it is instructional to how would we do something better than how it happened before, that makes a lot of sense. But, I have a section here that Dan's going to help us walk through about, successes and controversies. I mean, what are you guys working with? So that was my thought.
One of the things we need to do is really look at empowering the Urban Renewal Board itself or Commission itself. We can't be sitting back and not. We need to control our own agenda. We need to be looking at the city staff and giving them instructions rather than us sitting back and only getting instructions after the fact. And I think so. It's this area of playing a responsible lead role in making smoke come out the chimney. And we have a lot of horsepower here, and we're not using the horsepower. And maybe it's time that we get into the position of using the strengths and expertise that exists around this board, and I see quite a bit of it. And I think that we're not being used at our full potential, and I think that's a mistake.
Okay, well, the role, what you've just done is, do a great segue to first item on the agenda, the role of the Urban Renewal Commission. Before we go to that, I think, obviously, I thought that was an important thing to talk about as well. But before we go there, are there any questions about sort of how I thought we might approach this so that we could actually accomplish getting to, sorting through what you want to do or not do? Are there other things, Nancy, I really do view these as overarching things. I also believe that they relate to how does the commission do business, and I think that somewhat relates to what Paul is talking about.
There's another critical issue, and it's getting our fiscal house in order. We have not maybe used our resources in the best way possible because there are opportunities out there that we might miss because we don't have our act together. And so the fiscal side, making sure that we use the resources we have smart, is critical. And I believe that that's not been what's been happening.
Okay. So shall we just plunge in and then add, subtract, and multiply?
Please.
That might be the easiest thing to do. So as to the role of the Urban Renewal Commission, let me do a little bit of back to my Urban Renewal 101 just very quickly. And as you all know, urban renewal agencies they exist in every city and county in the state. And if a city or county chooses to activate its urban renewal agency, then it passes an ordinance to do that, and that's what obviously Oregon City did, and chooses how to exercise its powers. So you all have chosen a mixed board, so that's really simple. The reason for urban renewal initially, and this goes back to the Dark Ages, was in the late 50s and early 60s providing matching funds to government HUD grants, which predates the community block grant program. And you had to have a certain amount of money, local money, to match the federal money that was coming in for community development activities. So this concept that there would be some special pot of money that could be devoted to community development activities and development activities was first thought up in probably a California barroom someplace, but it comes out of California, and then adopted in Oregon in the late 50s. And so the purpose of having urban renewal agencies, I should say, the special powers that an urban renewal agency has that makes a city or county want to activate them is that you can do two things that no other municipal government can do. Number one, you can take a little piece of all of the other taxing districts' money and devote it to certain projects that are for the purpose of implementing an urban renewal plan. And an urban renewal plan has to be based on, one of you said blight. based on the notion that you have a blighted area. So you've got the money side that's special, and then you also have the ability to assemble land for redevelopment purposes. Now, up until a few years ago, you could do it through using condemnation. You can't assemble land for redevelopment purposes using condemnation anymore, but you can still assemble land through voluntary acquisition and dispose of it for less than its fair market value in order to induce, I guess induce is as good a word as any, in order to attract private development that wouldn't otherwise happen in a market economy. So if you look at why would a city or county activate its urban renewal agency, those are the big powers you've got, okay? So those powers, though, have to be, all of the activation of those powers has to be consistent with two things, according to the law: the city's comprehensive plan and the city's economic development plan, if it has one, okay? And so the idea is that the Urban Renewal Agency controls a couple of very important tools that are to be used for the purpose of accomplishing these projects that have been adopted by the city or county commission through adoption of the urban renewal plan as those projects that should go forward. Now, so that gets to sort of the relationship between the city commission in your case and the urban renewal commission. Obviously, the city commission has a much broader range of powers, but you really are a focused agency. Your purpose is to cure blight. Your purpose is to implement the urban renewal plan. Now, of course, there's nothing that says you cannot either within the scope of your power change the urban renewal plan, or within the scope of your power recommend changes to the city commission in the urban renewal plan and how you spend the money and what projects you want to pursue. But if you look at the other thing that an urban renewal agency has is a longer term vision. And I actually read some of the applications of the people who are independent urban renewal commissioners, and there was a theme about, I want to have a long-term impact. I want to look out there at, the long term, like my kids and my grandkids, kind of a long term for my city. And that's one of the advantages of urban renewal, is it is a long-term process. And I know some of you have heard this because you've sat through these presentations before, but the idea of you make an investment, that investment induces private investment, which produces improvements to property, which produces tax dollars, which then you can use to reinvest again, and it's a circular process until you have done the projects you want to do, or you have deemed that you have sufficiently cured blight. So the idea of a long view, and no offense to the city commissioners, but you're elected for fixed terms, and they aren't 30 years. And so the urban renewal plan is the way that a city can look at implementing measures for over a very long period of time. What I wrote in numbers 1 through 4 is the way I view the role of an urban renewal agency. This was meant to be the beginning of discussion, and we already have begun that discussion with Paul's comments. Generally speaking, the Urban Renewal Commission would act like a board of directors of a corporation. You set the goals, you approve the broad plans, you delegate to somebody to go out and do the messy work, and you come back and you approve or disapprove. I mean, that is the idea of the Urban Renewal Commission. So I put that out there as a place to start the discussion of the role, but keeping in mind those that long-term view, the limited amount of powers you have under state law and under your plan. What do you think? What do you want to say? any comment? I mean, Paul, let me ask this question. I mean, what I heard, if I was correct, was that you would like to see the urban renewal commissioners more personally involved in particular projects, particular programs. What are you thinking?
It's about bringing our skills and expertise and involvement into the process, so that that as efforts develop, or we become partners in the process, having members of the Urban Renewal Commission sitting in and being part of the process, so as that we can continue to report, each of us, to the total as to what is occurring, so that there's nothing happening in the process behind the doors. It's all open, and it's in this idea of open, transparent world. We should be able to do that right now. I don't believe that's happening.
Paul, can you just give me an example? Because I don't quite get what you're...
Well, I'll give you an example. The other day, I was contacted by a developer who wants to step in to the possibility of putting together a proposal for the what would be the rivers. They asked me to come in and sit in on a meeting. I didn't ask them to sit in. They called me and asked me to come in and sit into the meeting. I thought it would be in our best interest to understand what was being said by the city, what were the infrastructural implications that this developer was going to face. And at that moment, it was presented to me that it would be inconsistent in my role as a sitting city commissioner that I should be a participant in any of these discussions. I felt that that was wrong, but I went along with it primarily because that moment was not the case to try to air those discussions, but it was to be consistent with being a city commissioner, and I was asked to step back. I did. But I don't believe that it was right, and I think that we should have our ear to the ground. We should be knowing what's happening. We should be part of the process, not excluded from the process.
But if they're going to come before us for urban renewal funds, we have to be neutral.
Well, this doesn't mean that we participate, but we understand. And yes, we can still be neutral in it without any problem whatsoever. It's just understanding all of the facets of what is happening and why it's being happening, and what our staff is actually saying.
Well, I was the person that suggested it was inappropriate, and I'll bring it right now. There was no problem at all in having that group coming forward with proposals and bringing it to staff. I think when we as individual members of the commission come to those meetings, there is the appearance that we're there as individuals advocating for that particular project, and that's the danger.
You would have to excuse yourself.
I think that becomes the danger.
Commissioner,
I'm going to disagree with that, because I think there is often on this board confusion as far as the rules that apply to, say, the Planning Commission under our land use code, which we have to declare ex parte contacts, etc. And that really doesn't apply to this commission. And I don't think that the neutrality is an important issue, but I agree with Paul, but that by an individual commissioner doing fact-finding, sitting in on meetings, learning what the details are, I don't think that presents a neutrality issue or a bias issue.
Well, I kind of would disagree, just because sitting there means that you're representing the city in their perception. I mean, it's a perception issue.
It's not the case when the city manager is going to be one of the people present at these meetings. I mean, I've been to lunches, with the city manager. I've been in meetings with people with the city manager. My understanding from Mr. Edgar is that the city manager wasn't involved in this meeting, so I don't particularly think that there was an issue during this meeting.
I've been to meetings with the city manager, with the previous development people, Fred Bruning, and I've sat down with other developers and people, with the city manager and with other players. I did not find any difference whatsoever with this particular meeting, but it was more wanting to know, how does our city staff dispose themselves, and what do they say? How do they represent our city? And in a fact-finding way, I felt this was important for me to understand, not to be representing any developer or anybody. I just wanted to know what's the process and what people are saying.
So let me ask a question, and maybe this is to everyone on the board. It sounds like there is a certain, at least from Paul's point of view, of a mistrust of representations that are made by the staff who are your delegated representatives, that they are either not fully disclosing to you or that they are misrepresenting to others. Is that a
I would use the
concern?
word. I don't know that I'd use that word, mistrust. I think that's inappropriate.
Okay.
I think it's more of us knowing.
But you would only know.
Yeah.
Only you would know. I mean, the
So
10
you
of
have
you
to
would not know.
Email all 10 of us and say, do you want to go meet with this developer? Then we'll all know.
Well, at the same time, I've tried to I thought that it was always appropriate for us to to email us back and forth, and for us to circulate thoughts and ideas. But I've been told that we can't do that.
No, you can't do that.
So it's how do we communicate?
Okay.
And this is a very, very difficult issue. And
So it's communication that's the issue.
well, it's communicating with responsible facts, and being on top of the table, and I would like to be able to make an intelligent votes on and set intelligent dialogue. And what I need is good fact finding in order to be prepared to present a position.
Okay, so is there a general sense among the commission that their participation, and maybe I need to back up a little bit, Paul. Are you talking specifically about the negotiation of public-private partnerships? There's a whole bunch of things that you all do that are, projects in your plan, that are other kinds of programs that are within the urban renewal plan and within the purview of the urban renewal agency. Are you particularly talking about the real estate negotiations of a big deal?
No, I'm talking about overall knowledge about what we're presenting, and making sure that, to me, it's like, are we putting our best foot forward? Are we making we want to win. We have a great opportunity, and I become concerned as somebody who has spent quite a bit of my life in marketing, that little things can make a hell of a lot of difference. And I want to make sure that we present our best foot forward all the time. And I don't know that is always happening. And I maybe am a little bit better marketer than some people. At least I perceive I am. And I would like to know that we're doing what we should be doing the smartest way we can.
So it does kind of sound like it's mistrust.
Well, I want to know. I don't know.
I'd like to explain what I consider to be the problem, and it's access to information is critical to evaluating economic development programs. We support strong right-to-know provisions for state and local economic development programs to ensure that information is collected, evaluated, and made available to the general public. I'd like to see more of these types of measures taken when we're evaluating projects.
Okay, I have to say something because this is a huge group. It's a group, as you said, with a huge amount of history. I was talking before the meeting started that we're supposed to have a dinner break in between the meetings, and I kind of joked that there would be no break between the meetings. We've already been going an hour, and every person here has so much to say, and we just sit here waiting to just pounce on whatever someone says because we have that much emotion behind all what we're talking about. We're not going to get anywhere. I don't even know where we begin as a group until we just completely start from scratch and not talk about anything else other than what's on that paper. And I'm almost positive, go back to our goals training at the beginning of the year, commissioners. Look at that page. I'm pretty sure we all agree with what's on that page. Okay? If we agree with what's on that page, then we can move forward. If we can't agree with what's on that page, then how do we solve those little points? But let's start there first. Once we agree on that page, how do we start narrowing it down? Because starting to talk about individual meetings and individual projects and individual things, there's too much baggage here. We have not started with a clean slate as a group. And we got to do it. Because I don't know how we're going to get anywhere until we do.
Madam Chair? Perhaps,
I think we have a lot of agreement in the room.
well, okay, perhaps what we could do, we've heard from Paul about a different role of the commission than the one that the commission currently has. And are there, maybe I should say one that I would understand the commission would have, which is that board of directors kind of a role. Perhaps the right thing to do is to admit that at this point, because we've already spent an hour, and good point, Rocky. You can see the clock, I can't. That there is an issue that needs to be worked through about, and maybe it's this whole bigger notion of how do you do business, okay? How do decisions get made? How do, you've got a huge group here. Should you have subcommittees? Should you have, particular people who are designated as liaison to particular projects and they participate in discussions? How are you going to best get, whatever that was, transparency, accountability, and responsibility in your processes? And not just your there's the process among yourselves, and then there's the process out to the public. But it sounds to me like there's an issue with the processes among yourselves and staff. And when I say among yourselves, the half circle starts over there. Among yourselves that need to be worked through. And perhaps the thing to do is for people to make any other statements they want to make about how the commission currently relates to decision making and transparency, accountability, responsibility, and then think about it for a while and maybe come back to this at a future meeting, because I tend to agree that this is probably another hour and a half discussion to get others to chime in. So does that make a lot of sense, or are we dodging something you want to wrestle to the ground this evening?
I think the problem is that we don't have a process. We've never had a process. It's basically sitting up here and fighting it out. And we've never really worked on a process together as a group. And so that's why when I say start from scratch, I really think we need to have a discussion about how we operate as a group. And before we do that, can we at least get on the same page of what we're trying to achieve? Because we're not even there yet.
Madam Chair, what would you like to do?
Will, what would be the direction that you would go from here?
Well,
I agree that from my standpoint, I think how we do business is a big discussion. I don't know if we can have the discussion that was supposed to take place tonight without having had that first discussion or not. Do you think that there's a way to have a productive discussion about the projects? Because personally, I really have no issue with the projects. I have an issue with how we go through the process of implementation. And again, it's the process. What is the process? We don't have an application. We don't even know who's out there with projects. We haven't even defined any processes other than the storefront grants. Yes.
I agree with that. We don't have a process, and as being one who was also heavily shot down in one of the projects, there's a lot of people on this commission who have access to exciting ideas and opportunities for Oregon City. And if we can't talk to people about our ideas and these opportunities, how do they get brought to town? So I think we do need to define a process and what we exactly bring to this as our idea of what our role is on the commission. Not of what we want to achieve, but exactly how do we define what we're supposed to be doing here.
Doug?
Actually, I don't have any problem with that. I think if there's a project that you feel can go forward, then I think you can direct you're dealing with some entity or something that's going to advance that project, then they start talking to staff. When you as individuals go in there with the group advocating for it, you may be giving a spin to the staff that's not really appropriate when the commission hasn't really had a chance as a whole to talk about it. I have no problem with people putting forward suggested projects coming forward. That wasn't my problem. When the one issue came up, I had no problem at all with that group going in to talk to staff. But my problem was to have an individual or a couple of individuals coming as advocates for that to be pushed forward in any process. That was my concern.
Well, from my standpoint, I'm reading from, this is a document that is put out by the Center of Wisconsin Strategies, proposed elements of TIF reform, and their recommendation is that municipalities develop stronger mandatory scoring criteria for designated projects and require a clearer, more robust economic analysis justifying the TIF assistance. These criteria must include more elements than expanding the tax base. For example, every deal must serve a public purpose, and that purpose should be outlined in the TIF development agreement. And then they've got a list of proposed criteria that the municipality might use. So I think there are tools out there that other people have used to get at some of these procedural types of questions. And I also really agree with what everybody else has said here. Anybody else want to jump in?
I've been one for a long time who've advocated for weighted value decision processing, and I wholly believe and support the whole idea of we've got to get to a better criteria, better weighting process that's more inclusive of our public agenda and get it on top and out. So I think that's important. We can improve.
I think that the public should have a good view of what decisions are made and why they're made, as well as ourselves. We should all have the same view. And right now, we're having these, one project and one developer is put in front of us to make a decision, yes, no, rather than, okay, here's a portfolio of ideas and projects and proposals, and how do we weigh them against certain criteria and evaluate the economic viability as well as the effectiveness of these proposals within the context of the framework that that you've been covering.
I think Phil.
Go ahead.
Did you?
I guess I have no problem with that. My concern is if you have things that have been ongoing, that in fact we are evaluating, where we've given extensions to a developer to come in, And if you're going to use that as a basis and negate any process that's in process, I think that is problematic. Now, the project on the Rossman landfill, I mean, we don't have anything at this point. That's fine. We do have a project, however, on the Cove that there's been considerable investments made, both by the Urban Renewal Commission and by the a developer. And if in fact this kind of policy is going to be interjected before the developer has the chance to put forward the project, and you're going to weight it against something that doesn't even exist, I think that is problematic.
I think a lot of these things already exist. I think what we're trying to do is measure, and we want to be able to say, how do we know that we're making the best decisions?
I agree completely with what you said about the distinction between looking back, about your earlier comment too, that we should be forward-looking, not backward-looking. I think we don't need to dwell on the mistakes in the past except to sort of eliminate the future. I think it maybe makes sense for a subcommittee, it was a suggestion she had, to come up. I really like what you just read. I think it's the core of what I'm concerned about here mostly, which is the process. Maybe we should come up with a one-page document that maybe I'd like to have some input. Maybe we could all, can we do this collectively online? To come up with a few of us, to come up with a proposal on some process changes along the lines of what you just described. I've got some ideas too in terms of evaluation, things like that I've discussed in the past, so that we can actually have some sort of extra layer of process here that we haven't had in the past, and vote on it as an up or down, just as a motion to modify how we make decisions. Because I really think that's the guts of what's going on here in terms of concerns, is how these decisions get made in ways that, to me at least, have lacked in evaluation and real rigor, and the danger of funding things that are going to get funded would have happened anyway, which is my biggest concern.
Is that yes, go ahead.
Well, I think we have a teach a learning moment here, whatever we want to call it. We had an urban renewal textbook case with that Rivers project. And why did it fail? Why? Well, it's maybe not gone, but what are we going to learn from that? That was a textbook case for urban renewal. And it's gone. And what are we going to learn from that? That's not every city has had that opportunity. So I think that's what, if we can learn something from that, that's going to influence all these projects we do here. Now the problem is, well, it's good and bad. We've got 10 members here. But gosh, geez, we've got 10 members here. This could be good and bad. Now did that affect that project? Maybe. If it had been, just the city commission, whatever, it could have gone a different way maybe. But, it was very embarrassing. I mean, the majority of the citizens of this town wanted that project, and it's gone. When do we say we're supposed to be representing the citizens of Oregon City, and does this list here account for that?
Some people would argue that that project, as we know it, did not serve the public interest, and that's why it failed.
Okay.
You saw it the open house.
I would stand behind that.
You see,
and so that's the problem. Is that what I'm saying is that we need to have a better way of conveying information about these projects that have not been made available in the past.
I'm going to have to. Sitting here, I'm going to have to say something about that, because every time you say that, you look over here.
Yeah.
So I just want to clear this up right now.
Okay.
Anytime I get questioned by anybody about that project, whether it be a citizen, a member of this commission, or the media, anybody else, I give the information. Okay. I think if you ask the city commissioners that I work with, they'll say, we like Dave, he just over-communicates. So, but I do only have enough time to satisfy a 5-member commission. I don't have the time, and we don't have the staff resources to have 2 city commissions. One, the city commission, who has the legal responsibilities,
to a de facto city commission who is called the Urban Renewal Commission. And I think if you agree that these two primary things, curing blight and completing the urban renewal plan, are really the statutory responsibilities that you're charged with, and then look at the plan. Look what's in that plan, because for staff, we just want, I know you heard me say this before, we really would like to know what the consensus is on the projects that you want us to pursue. And then if we look back at the rivers, I don't think there's anybody here that says there wasn't enough publicity. Now, I don't know about before I came here, maybe there wasn't enough. And when I look back at that, I would probably have suggested more public involvement from the very beginning. But in the time that I've been here in the last 14 months or so, all I've done is talk about that project and get information out and try to inform not just this commission but the public. I also suggested, and I think the commission wisely consented to a process where we would negotiate that DDA in executive session and release information when we could. That was the best way to get to a yes. We couldn't get there. Now, there are a whole number of factors, some of which none of us are ever going to know, I think, that were the reasons we couldn't really get there. But I just want to get away from this. I don't know if it's communication or it's understanding the role. Paul was talking about roles. If every single commissioner is a staff member, you're going to have chaos. It won't work. However, if some of you want to resign and be volunteer staff members, we can probably keep you busy. But I think if you could, I do like this idea, though, that you mentioned about application and criteria, because as I understand it, in the past, projects started because somebody knew somebody who knew somebody. And there was an urban renewal need, and there was a project that was consistent with the plan. People started having these offline discussions, and the next thing you know, somebody's bringing a project to the Urban Renewal Commission. And I think if we look at the rivers as a case study, when I think about moving forward to the next, like, what's plan B for that site? I mean, even let's assume that we could reach a consensus in this room about what plan B was. For Oregon City to go out and market and seek an RFP to a new set of developers, those developers are looking at that hill with a machine gun nest up there, and they're saying, okay, there's all these bodies laying there. Fred Bruning is the chief general. He's laying there. How are we going to be different? How are we going to get up that hill? And what they need to know from us as a city is, what does it take? What are the criteria that this commission believes in and cares enough about? What kind of project does it take to access urban renewal funds? What will they be used for? And then we can put together a set of criteria that they can count on, because there does need to be a certain amount of certitude in those applications, because otherwise we're just going to have more. I don't think we're going to get a development. So you got to agree on what it is that you want to achieve on the site. Then what are the criteria by which funds will be used? And I know that every member on this commission would probably say, well, if it cures blight and it serves a public interest, then we might use those funds. But what is that? Defining that almost by a project basis is the key, because the 10 of you do not agree on what's in the public interest, as we just saw. When it comes to the rivers, we didn't have agreement here. And that's not a secret. And so if we could get an application that had enough more detail in it, I think that's a great idea. I'd like to a chance to work on an application and get input from you about what the criteria would be, what it would take to get approval on a project. But I'd like to back up a little further and ask, do we want to use urban renewal? And if we do, let's look at that plan and see what's in there that you like and what you don't like. Take the things out you don't like, put things in you do like, so we can kind of try to get some of these things done. Thank you.
I think one of the things that you have to take into account is, in the case of the Rossman's landfill, there's a private property owner. And the interest there of that private property owner has to be taken into account in the process. Now, one possibility, of course, is to make a offer to the property owner to buy the property, and all of the liabilities that's associated with that particular property. I don't think the Urban Renewal Agency wants to do that. So you could say, well, let's not deal with that piece of property.
But there are other
But-
solutions.
Well, you're going to have to work with the private property owner. I mean, that solution has to be part of the picture. And so we can come up with our criteria, but if that's not the direction the property owner wants to go, that's not the way the property owner is going to go, and maybe nothing happens
They don't
there.
need public money.
Well, they don't need public money, but the point is that as long as that stands there as essentially a landfill, that is not in public interest.
So, I'm sorry, did you want to?
I just wanted to add a little bit more to what David was getting at with the plan. The projects that have been done in the past have not been done willy-nilly because staff came up and thought of something. Every project that Urban Renewal has done has been an Urban Renewal plan. The plan's been amended several times. I think I went through the long list of all the amendments at some meeting recently. But I think that's what you want to look at your plan. And you're right. If there's and it's broken down into districts. And so far we've been working exactly per the plan. And another layer of government, which could be great to get at your points, Commissioner Yates, would be good. But I think you've got to be careful that you don't add too much bureaucracy if you're trying to make private development, economic development happen, because sometimes those are opportunities that come. But what I really wanted to say was we have an urban renewal plan. If you wanted to change the project list, you can, but then there's some specific laws that go along with what kinds of amendments are you making and what process there needs to be for those amendments. And in the past, when we've done them, we've gone through all of the legal process to T, and I can vouch for that because I've been part of it. And you can trust me, too.
Could I give a real example of what happened when I was mayor that addresses this point?
Do you want to come up here? Or, wait,
mean,
I don't know if it's but it's up to...
Is that all right?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
It wasn't a question, it was I guess, may I speak about an example of with this very example, when I was mayor, in getting someone to come into town, how it worked. I think it might reflect on what do you do when somebody approaches you.
I suppose I don't know that I don't know that we can really assign any kind of positive or negative attributes to your encounter.
But we can
I wasn't asking about positive or negative.
I would say the statement by the chair was inappropriate.
Well, no, what I'm saying is that I'm not sure what you're...
Go
ahead. Okay. Thank you.
I just asked if I could share an example of how a company was approached back when I was sitting on Urban Renewal. And I would like, if you don't want me to speak about it, I won't, but I just was seeking permission.
Go ahead.
Dan Fowler, former mayor back in the 90s, and citizen of Oregon City. It's a tough question you're wrestling with, and it's not an easy one. I would use your expertise, and it is varied, to set a good plan. Now, that doesn't mean that you're never approached. And I want to give an example. I read in the paper that Benchmade Knives was looking for a new home. And I thought, wow, we've been trying to get companies like that to come up into the red soils area of Oregon City. We'd set policies to that regard. And so what's my role as mayor at the time and as a sitting urban renewal commissioner? To help that happen, because those things happen. You have ideas. I never at one moment left the staff out of the loop, which I think is a critical point. You have to trust staff, and you have to always work through the staff. Because if all of us did that when we had an idea, you'd have chaos. Somebody said that a minute ago. So the very first thing I did is I went to see Charlie Leeson, who at that time was our city manager and urban renewal director, and said, hey, I read this. I don't know if it has any legs or not, but why don't we see if they will come? I said, would you like to call them and make an appointment? Here's the guy's name. It was all in the paper. It was Les Diasis, lived in West Lynn. I didn't know him at the time at all. And I said, if you'd like me to go with you, I'd be happy to go and just as mayor do the rah-rah for our town and see if they would come. Charlie called, made an appointment. We went out together. We met with Les. It We said, hey, just come and check out our city. It's part of it. We have an urban renewal district. We would love to get you in our town. You look like a great employer. And he came. And we had one meeting at his place. He came, and I wasn't even with him when he came and looked at the site. The staff took it from that point. So, and then it proceeded all the way through the staff from that point. So, yeah, you have an idea, and you have those, but coalesce with your staff. Use the people that you have that can help you get those decisions. You guys are all busy doing your own jobs, your own professions. These are the professional people that have the time during the day to make all those appointments and do those things. And in that case, it worked. I mean, and then there's a number of them that don't work. But that was a way that we were able to separate responsibilities of an elected or appointed member of a body, interfacing with staff, and then dealing with the private sector to get a business to come. So I wanted to share that is how it helped define. Maybe that helps define roles, but you're the policy setters, and yet you're still the cheerleaders. But don't be out on your own.
What did Benchmade Knives get in terms of urban renewal funding?
They bought the land at that time. I think we had a reduced rate on the land, industrial land, and I think it was a couple dollars a square foot.
We built some of the infrastructure.
Yeah, and then some of the infrastructure went in the road. It helped drive that whole project through there. And but now they're a major employer in our town.
Can we discuss this just for a minute? Because I think this is an ideal kind of thing. Now, it seems to me, just looking at that in the abstract, I know it's a great thing to have an employer up here. Benchmade Knives has been a great community asset. But it seems to me that the decision that was made on how much money to spend, all those decisions, to the extent that they are negotiated, as opposed to structured, and each deal has to be in some way flexible. But to the extent that those things are not nailed down and it's done with you and the city manager in a room,
well, it wasn't.
It just strikes me that it worked out well there. And believe me, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, any wrongdoing, but it just has the opportunity for graft and corruption when you do those kinds of deals without some kinds of controls to keep people from doing things that they shouldn't do with public money. And it is the lack of that kind of controls that causes me the most concern. So what I would suggest is that if you have a spot up there that you want to have, then you say, okay, we've got so much money for infrastructure that we're going to spend. We've decided this is how much we're going to spend. Now, Benchmade Knives, we've put this together. Come on in. Here it is. And then it's not, okay, I'll do something for you, scratch your back, scratch my back, and we cut a deal. It's a more transparent kind of open
I think you're making some
process.
very broad assumptions that those things happen, and I would be happy to go back and
I don't want to make any accusations.
Well, you keep using backroom deals and all that stuff, and let me tell you, when I went out to Benchmade Knives, there's no backroom deals. All of the talk of price of the land was published. We had brochures. It was published. And to be honest with you, I can't remember. I wasn't involved in the further negotiations, but all those were done under the direction of and keeping the commission informed. Now, it would be interesting to go back and look at all the executive session and look at the minutes of those meetings. I think they're probably still around to see, because I can't remember all of the bits of infrastructure and pieces that were put into place in that getting them to come into the area. But there's got to be negotiations. You're not going to get the private sector to come into a public meeting and negotiate every piece of a deal. You've got to trust your staff to be able to do that. Characterizing negotiations as always a backroom deal is being a little bit paranoid about an urban renewal agency and the way it functions. You've got to be able to discuss that and not put a negative connotation on the ability to talk about what it takes to bring someone into a city. But it would be interesting to go back and look at what was said in detail, because I don't recall. The last thing, then I'll get out of the way, is the concept of criteria. And I think Doug said it a minute ago. If you're really wanting criteria and multiple offers from developers to come in and to improve 10th and Main, or to improve 12th and Main. You own those. Those are in your purview. You can put an RFP together. You can treat it like Lake Oswego did when they did the Manzama block. That was the block. Their urban renewal agency assembled that entire block. They put it out into the development community and said, convince us you're the one we should pick to do that project. And you can have a set of criteria, and they could weigh the design review of it, the number of shops, the whole bit. You have that full ability as an urban renewal agency on land you own. If you're talking about land you don't own, you're overstepping. You're overstepping.
I
Now,
disagree. I think there could be a partnership. Plus, we aren't doing this process on land we own.
If you have a
So
partnership,
it'd be really nice to see it on just the land we own. I'd like to see us institute a process for the application of public money, not specific. I mean, we're not talking about, we're supposed to be informed when a project application is made within the district anyhow. So
I'm not talking about being informed. I'm talking about real world, how to get something done. Okay? Now, how you get something done is when you have a private property owner. I'm not against going into partnership with a private property owner. You could do that with Scott Parker right now and say, Scott, these are some criteria we think would fit really well on your property. What do you think about it? But if he says, you're full of it, I'm not going to do that on my property. You own it or zone it. You own it or zone it. I mean, and if you don't want to own it, you zoned it, and that's what's going to be allowed on that property. So I think you have the most control on property owned. That was my point. I'm not saying, I think you just have to be careful in putting those layers and your expectations on the private property owner that is within your urban renewal district. But I think there are pieces where you can help set tone by properties you do own. So anyway, thank you. I appreciate you letting me speak.
Okay, well,
All right.
thank you.
May I make a comment? Okay. It seems to me, listening to what's going on here, is that we should probably leave the idea of process on the table for you all to take up later. But I see just what I heard. Two things. One was some desire to have more specific direction about how you do business. So by that I mean how you do business as a commission, okay? So what are, how do you present projects to the public? How do what kind of public hearings do you have? What, do you make decisions by consensus or by majority? All those kinds of things that have to do with how you and how you communicate with staff and what your role is as commissioners as to the particular projects in the plan. That's one set of things you've brought up that you want to have some certainty about. The other thing is the notion of some kind of additional certainty about the criteria for investing money. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, because it's not on land that you don't own. Develop it without our money, we have no say. Develop it with our money, we have some say. Okay? So that's one set. And if we own the land, then we dictate what we want, and we either get it or we don't, and we make compromises or whatever. But, the idea of putting together approaches for those projects, and somebody said, the projects need to be looked at individually. I don't think you're going to have a RFP fill in the blanks. I mean, you might for, Oregon City is a city of so many thousand people, blah, blah, blah. But not, you're going to have different criteria for different projects. So the other thing I think when you think about this notion is important is how much effort do each of you individually, want to put into that kind of thing, putting together criteria for each project, working on those individually. If this is something that the group absolutely believes is totally necessary, then I know the time commitment will be there. But so that's really important. And then the third thing is that last time I was here, I said, I don't know what color my hair is on purpose, because I've been doing this for so dang long. But what I do know is that opportunity knocks. And so if you're going to have criteria for projects or for, general criteria or ideas about how you're going to invest your money, you need to do them in advance of the opportunities, if at all possible. And then you need to be ready to be flexible when the opportunity comes through the door, but still, minding those criteria as your touchstone. Because frankly, if you look at what you already have, a lot of this work has already been done. Not maybe totally specifically, but for example, each of these projects, and I probably would, if you guys want to transition to talking a bit about the projects, each of these projects is described not only as what it might be, but it also talks about how much urban renewal money is anticipated would go into a project and how much private investment would be leveraged. So there's already kind of an outline of that part of what are we expecting for criteria. Okay, so we've committed, the possibility of $1 million for this project, but we expect you to invest 10. That's here. You guys already have that. How it connects to your other public goals, that's all part of the urban renewal plan. Each project needs to be shown how the projects connect to the comprehensive plan and the economic development plan of the city. That's in the report on this plan. So, there's stuff here already that you can work from, I guess is what I'm getting at. There's work that's already been done.
Yeah, I'm going to segue from what you just said, because if I got one proposal and one point in tonight, this is the point I wanted to make. I'm glad you mentioned the plan being associated with a specific economic development strategy. Our current urban renewal plan is based on a series of reports that were done in 2004 and 2006. The Oregon City Future Strategy, the study, and then the implementation strategy. Those studies were done during the pre-2008 bubble or boom. And I am of a conviction that world is just gone. I heard on NPR yesterday about what economists are calling the new normal. I mean, the entire structure of our economy is just different now, and I think it's just not a good idea to move forward with this Urban Renewal Commission based on those economic assumptions and concepts. So my recommendation as far as our goals and objectives for this commission would be one, and in fact, I remember reading in the 2004 and 2006 documents, they even state in that document that times change and you need to adapt the plans and studies to new information and new situations. And I think since the collapse of 2008, we are in a new situation. And I think what we need to do is, rethink the whole economic basis for development in Oregon City based on the reality that we live in today. We don't live in 2005 anymore. We don't live in 2003 anymore. It's 2011, and the world is just a different place economically. And the decisions we make as an urban renewal, I think, have to be based on that reality that we're living in today. So I would recommend as a goal to retain a new economic development consultants to advise us on what the economic reality is today and what we can do as an urban renewal commission based on that reality. And the second thing I would amend and update the urban renewal commission plan based on that new information, and by what we've budgeted for, the community visioning process for the urban renewal plan district, such as they did in Beaverton, because a lot of what we're talking about is what is the vision. The ideas come from the people, and I think if we get the community involved on a really proactive basis, getting their ideas on what the vision for the urban renewal district is, I think a lot of the issues we have about is disputes that we have on this commission can be solved through that process, because one of the things that happened as one of our planning commissioners, Denise McGriff, who has looked into this, has pointed out, they came away, I mean, Beaverton has had all kinds of divisions, too, about things like the Round and other projects, too. But what happened through this community visioning process is they did come to a consensus. And they adopted a plan based on that consensus, and they're going to vote on it. So that's where I think we're kind of in a situation now where it's just a different world. Let's recognize that. Let's get economic data about what the world is like now. Let's open up the plan for revision based on what input we get from citizens in a very structured process, and create a staff structure to help us implement that. So as far as like specific goals, those would be my proposals.
First of all, I support the, I guess you'd say, employment contract with a new economic development consultant that would actually look at what the situation is now. Forest Grove did something very interesting, and of course could apply. Whether it does them any good or not, I don't know, but they took a look at those top 10 businesses that have the highest growth in employment, and sent out letters and saying, we have areas you can grow to. If you want to think about expanding, come to Forest Grove. I thought that was great. We actually have Benchmade Knives there that has, for 2 years running, been in the top 10. Huh? I meant Funnel Box, excuse me. Benchmade is also a success story, but Funnel Box has been in the top 10 growth of employment in the last 2 years. I mean, we have successes here in Oregon City. We got Benchmade Knives, which is a success in Oregon City. And somehow we've got to advertise this as well. It doesn't apply only to our urban renewal district, but it's a major piece of what can happen here. And frankly, I'm not going to argue the pros and cons of the river situation, but frankly, the things that happen there, I think, has probably hurt us in terms of new businesses wanting to come here because of the uncertainty that this has resulted in. But I think if starting afresh with a new consultant, maybe we can deal with those uncertainties and make them more positive. And so I support that notion.
Just one quick comment I would make is that the economic development strategies that you're referring to, Jim, they began as city strategies. So they are based on work that the city did as the city. And then the urban renewal piece of it is what the Urban Renewal Commission was working with and adopting its own goals. So, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do, but I
Then what we get for all that money we paid the consultant?
Well,
that was a joke.
Well, what I was going to say was, you're a city commissioner as well, Jim, obviously, and I think that the question of whether you want to revisit the fundamental base of your economic development strategy that is 4 years old, this 2007 is how it evolved forward, because there's the regional town center plans and all. I mean, this all relates, of course, back to broader issues related to your comprehensive plan, related to your relationship with Metro and the region, or I should say the Metro region, not the organization. So just, I guess, be aware that you wouldn't be revisiting urban renewal if you're talking about revisiting the economic strategy, the economic basis of the strategy. So just kind of be aware of that. And that question might be more appropriate for the city commission to wrestle with, whether they want to go back and. Because I really like the colors in this. and again, I mean, my comment would be, you cannot deny we're in a new world, but pretend the new world doesn't exist. You all have done a process here over a number of years that has addressed your city's issues in more detail and with more thought and actually with more consistency than about anybody else I've ever seen. So you all have worked forward with this process. If you want to now go back and, redo something, have a second look at it, whatever, I would encourage you to not abandon the way that you've been doing this, because it does really build one to the next, and you end up with an urban renewal plan that has 14 projects. And maybe if you redid this, you'd end up with an urban renewal plan that has 2 projects, or maybe it has 96. So I just encourage you to not lose the fact that you've been doing more than the right thing in getting this all connected. I mean, if you want to look at different numbers, that's a different decision for you all.
Jim, I really, I think I listened to the same thing about the new normal, and the reference was just to the unemployment rate. We have a European-style unemployment rate in this country now, and apparently it's a long-term thing, and we've got a very low real estate situation. It's going to stay that way for about 10 years, but I don't really think that it is very different. We still have blight. We still have people who need rates of return on their investments. We still have people who are making money, people who are losing money. I think that the concerns that we have, the two important concerns we have in terms of moving forward in this thing is, one, keep the burden on staff as low as possible with this 10-member group, and not spend more money on consultants that I don't really think we need. I agree. I think the visioning that we've done through this city, geez, I've been doing it for 20 years. I think the vision's great. My concern about this body has been how they implement the vision.
Yes.
And it was just the exact discussion I had with Dan earlier. I mean, he's got a vision of how to do this, which I just kind of disagree with fundamentally as to how that goes about. Now, we can debate that, and I think we should. And I think we need to do that quickly and efficiently, and we can do it in a meeting or two if we were to address the issues of how we go about making decisions. Basically, the thing that Nancy read earlier, if we were to elaborate on that just a little bit, I think we could, I'd love to get to a point where we can reach consensus on things here. I think there are some things that we can reach consensus on. I don't think we're ever going to reach consensus on the rivers, okay? But I think we can reach consensus on an idea I heard from him earlier this week on alleys development, things that are public space kinds of improvements. I can be behind 100% if it's done in an open way. I would like to work on, with other people on this group, some specific criteria which are just no-brainers for all of us, if we can, without having to reinvent the wheel, without going through a long, drawn-out process. I don't think it requires that. I'd like to, you've said, Paul, many times, let's get so we can do things. I don't think we can do anything at this point until we get off the dime.
We have to start hitting the nail on the head. We have to find projects and make sure that there is returns, and that's the reason why I set about to try to create some type of recommendation. I just thought that we needed to have something somebody put something down in writing that had some type of debatable questions that could be talked out, understood, refined, because these are just some thoughts that I had, a lot of it based around the whole idea that I don't want to see an urban renewal fund abused and taken out for another 30 or 40 or 50 years and never bring a return back to the citizens and still be just a cost. I want to see it have projects that have defined plans and project life and returns on investment. They pay themselves off, and bango, we give the citizens a return for on their investment. And we're not doing that, and we've got a plan right now that takes and extends out urban renewal for the next 50 years, and I find that totally unacceptable. I feel it's going to just cost taxpayers money and not bring anything back in return and we've got to create, we can do better, and we can have that development, but without costing the taxpayers money.
It's really critical. I mean, I understand the concerns of Paul, but the taxpayer money in question is the increment produced by the project, and it's not robbing me of anything that I currently have or will have on my tax value. Where you've got blighted areas, you have to make investments that, especially when the public itself created the blight. I mean, people from all over this region, before there was a landfill, they were dumping all over Newell Creek Canyon. And after the dump site got created, it was a great improvement of what people were doing before. They concentrated all in one area, but it was an improvement. Attitudes change, and it is now a blighted area, and it is a blighted area. And I think those are places where those kind of investments can be made, because the fact of the matter is the public created it.
I don't want to go into foregone costs, so
So we have some differences of opinion about what urban renewal is.
I'd say so.
I'll go back to the comment I made an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Yeah.
We're
Please
still
do,
in the
Roger.
same place.
We're in the same exact spot.
Okay,
And
so
we're going to be there in another hour. So where do we start?
well, what I was trying to do, and it looks like there's not, perhaps I belabored the background too much in my thinking. I thought that it would be important to understand your projects and whether or not these are appropriate implementing projects if you understood what your goals were. And if you understand what your goals are, and or if you want to reset new goals. I mean, this is a very complicated discussion, obviously, but might it be helpful? Let me suggest this for the next 35 minutes. Might it be helpful to at least remind ourselves what we currently have for urban renewal goals in this plan, and then the implementing projects for those plans? And not that tonight you're going to say, thumbs up, thumbs down to projects, but rather that perhaps you can ask questions about, well, how does that fit into the goals that we have? Staff, tell us about that at our next meeting. Or, I get that one works, I don't get that one works. I'm definitely not trying to gloss over the very important kind of fundamental questions that have been raised here. Do you want to revisit the goals? That's Jim's question. I strongly encourage you to come up with some ways to do business that everybody's comfortable with, however that would be. And that's a really important issue, obviously. The idea of criteria for development, really important issue. But I think that at least if you could come away from this evening having some knowledge, there was a couple, 3 people wanted to learn, some knowledge about what you got now and why you got it. How does it fit in the big framework? That might be helpful. And, clearly we're not going to make decisions tonight, but is that something that, in other words, we're just kind of jump into, here's what the projects are and here's the goals that they are trying to achieve. And then as you think about your goals, you can, yeah, no, maybe. Is that something that you're interested in doing, or do you want to continue to talk about these other issues?
I support it. Does the group support going through the projects?
I mean, I think at least you need to understand them, and you need to understand them in the context of the goals that you already have. Your turn.
You want to talk about projects or goals?
Well, I think you ought to point out that on page whatever of your handout, I'm not sure which one it is, there are specific economic development goals set by the city, right?
Yeah.
And then there are economic then there are goals for the urban renewal plan, which is in that section 400.
Well, yeah, the section 400, we get into the renewal area objectives. I mean, there's 12 of those, and do we want to go through those?
Well, why don't you point to where they are? I'm lost here. Is this on page 11 of that handout?
Yeah, it's page 11, bottom of the page. There's that D, renewal area objectives. And the first one deals with eliminating blight, including inadequate streets and traffic congestion. And we have, like I say, on that page, you go to the next page, we have 12 specific goals that, I mean, I think everybody would agree on these. And do you want to run through those and try to get consensus? That could take a while.
Well, maybe what you can say is these are the goals that are currently in the plan, okay? Then how do the projects implement any of these goals, I think would be helpful for people to understand. Because again, it's this waterfall that you guys have going here. You know, starts up here and it goes down to the actual projects.
I mean, I guess what I would say is that's partly how the project list was initially generated, was by the list of objectives and goals in the plan. And then also the supporting documentation in the economic development strategy from 2004 and 2006. And I was looking at that 2004 and 2006 strategy, and I don't really know if that much has changed, because it was based on the concept of Oregon City as a regional center. I think we're still a regional center. It was based on the concept of a historic Old Town district. It was based on the concept of both a south anchor and a north anchor to the historic district, the south anchor being the Blue Heron site, the north anchor being the Rossman landfill site, and several of the properties that surround the landfill, some of which are owned by the county and some of which are owned by the Urban Renewal District. So if you look at the project list, they all relate to those. So a lot of this design context in the regional strategy, I don't know if it's changed that much. Clackamas Cove District, it talks about uses such as office and employment, housing, amenities to the water, public open space, public parks and recreation, and linkages to the Oregon City Shopping Center waterfront and the North Anchor site. There's a section on the waterfront and the need for public access, and the connections to the Oregon City Shopping Center district, and the need for the Oregon City Shopping redevelopment to be pedestrian friendly, mixed use. Also have a public open space, a finer network of streets and connectivity, and links to the waterfront, Clackamas Cove, and the landfill site. There's mention of the 7th Street Corridor District. That was one of the few urban renewal plans that we've implemented, is the construction of the 7th Street Corridor and how that connects to downtown and the Main Street. There's the concept of the Hilltop District, which is already closed, but the need to make sure that that area develops into mixed use. Now it's the area of the new Safeway site. And there's a recognition that that area, again, needs a mix of uses, include neighborhood retail, include uses such as grocery stores, dry cleaners, restaurants, hardware stores, other local service type uses. And also have a denser office uses and higher density housing. There's a section on the college and the need to connect the Beaver Creek concept area plan to the activities of Clackamas Community College. So a lot of these, that's just a real quick summary of the design concept that we already have. So there seems to be a general framework that I don't think is that far off the mark. And I think, Jim, what you talk about, which is a more detailed discussion of the fact, for example, that retail rents are 25% less now than they were in 2008 is an important factor, but that's not the level of detail that we have in some of these adopted plans. So it almost seems like what you're asking for is a greater level of detail than what we have, not necessarily a rework of some of these general planning documents.
And the retail cost per square foot values today are really 50% off. That's a dramatic change. So
Well,
the statistics of what's occurred when we did our studies back in 2004, they were built based upon 2002 and preceding numbers, and we're light years away from that, because that's what when they were doing the analytical work to build up to those studies, they were based upon 2 years preceding the date of publishing, statistically. And so what we're looking at is really a dramatic, there is not a comparison. We really have to take a serious look at what is really happening today. And it's completely different than what we were talking about that's part of this existing plan document.
So I think Dan's point is, though, the basic fundamental concepts of the economic development plan, those that you just read off from what I know seem like they're still in place. But you're asking for more detail, and that's something that would be something you might want to put in your...
What makes a retailer come in here into Oregon City today and make the investments necessary?
That's a very detailed piece of work compared to the goals and objectives that...
And we never did talk about back then about creating a sustainable community, about jobs in the manner of having family wage jobs in this area. We got to think more about today's economics, including the cost of fuel. It's a big deal.
I guess the need for retail will always be there. The need for commercial is going to always be there. We hope the need for industrial will always be there, and the need for residential will always be there. So the fundamental pieces that are there are still needs that we're going to have. The fact, and for all I know, part of the decisions on the part of Centerco was maybe the retail market was such that they weren't going to be able to go forward in this economy. And that may be the underlying fact of what happened. I do not know. But the point is that those needs are still going to be there, and they ought to be addressed in the plan.
I agree with Dan to an extent. I also agree with what Doug and Paul have just said, but I don't think I agree with phrasing what I'm talking about as just detail. I'm phrasing about fundamentals because I think the basic economic reality is what all of this, the rest of this, springs from.
I mean, would this be like zoning it industrial instead of retail? I mean, at that level?
Yes. That's one example. I'll give a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. Retail's just been mentioned. That's a big one. The Cove project, fundamentally, I mean, it's a mixed-use project, but the fundamental basis of the Cove project was condominiums, luxury condominiums. Given that they've been auctioning off, the condominiums that they built on South Waterfront, is the economics of 2011 are the fundamentals such that trying to build condominiums or even apartments that will later be sold as condominiums, are those fundamentals there for that? A third, just to get what Phil has said, a third it would be, do we rezone something for industrial? And another part of the fundamentals locally now that's different. I mean, I think nationally since 2008 the fundamentals are different. The fundamentals locally are profoundly different, if nothing else, because of Blue Heron's closure. And if we do something different there, I mean, Tony's raised the point about, where are we going to recoup the the requirements we have for industrial zoning and employment lands if we zone away the Blue Heron site from general industrial? Some folks have advocated the Rossman landfill area as a possible place for developing a value-added food processing industry in Oregon City based on the production of out 213 of small-scale sustainable ag and even into the Willamette Valley, and that might be an area for that kind of production. So that would be an industrial use. Do we rezone that area for that kind of industrial use because it's got the roads and it's got the rail and it's even got the water? So rethink that's a pretty big conceptual rethink of the North End.
Not an urban renewal issue, zoning. I mean, I agree. I've always thought that was ideally zoning, not residential.
So maybe we could tie that, Jim, what you're saying to the project list, because I think the thing that Ms. Lerner was saying is that the economic development strategy that the city has is what drove this project list largely. And you're suggesting that if you go back and look at that
but I think that the economic development strategy, because I've read both of them, I think that they were based on some economics research about what the economy was like at the time. And I just don't think we're in that world anymore. So that's.
So are you saying that if we're not in that world, and you're assuming that the economic strategy, if we updated it, would come out with different outcomes? Do you think those outcomes, are you presuming then that those outcomes would be different enough that they would change your 14 projects on your list? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a piece of information that's.
Yes, I think in certain instances it would be profoundly different. In other cases, it wouldn't be profoundly different. I mean, the discussion about downtown renovation of historic structures, I don't think that changes. Whether we include Blue Heron into the urban renewal district is a huge issue. Whether we transfer the North End into some kind of industrial zone. I mean, the woodworking place right at Redland and 213 is closed, and it's got a big for sale sign. I looked at the zoning map for that site. It's zoned mixed use downtown. I mean, that's an industrial use that's been zoned out of industrial use. And if you want to create, as Paul says, family wage jobs, I really think you got to look at that area and give a critical eye to its current mixed use downtown zoning. I think all of that was done so that there would not be inconsistent industrial uses around the Rivers project. But to extract and wipe out all that area around those railroads and those highways away from industrial uses that create family wage jobs, that's a fundamental. That's not a detail, and that's where I'm coming from.
And I did not understand that earlier.
If I may, and maybe that change is necessary. From 1980 to about 1995, it was zone industrial. There was nobody interested in it. And the fact you're seeing closures there of industrial properties, I think, has the same kind of issue. I'm sure if somebody else came in with an industry, within a year they still probably could have one if they bought at that particular site. The reason for the change was because about in the mid-1990s, you had a major retail developer that became interested in that site. We could change it back if we felt that was the direction to go. But the fact is, no matter what you build on that landfill site, it's going to require a major investment. So whatever it is, it has to have sufficient value at the end to justify that investment to make it buildable, because it's not buildable. And the Home Depot's experience there, where they had, I think it was in the terms of millions of cost overruns because of what they had to do to that particular site, gives you an indication of what would have to happen at that landfill site if it was going to be developed. Now, I don't know that some kind of food value industry put at that site would ever justify the kind of investment you'd have to make it buildable in the first place.
So it sounds like we're still looking at the an economic analysis, maybe take a fresh look at.
But isn't really it's more of a zoning analysis than an economic
that's right.
analysis.
Exactly right.
And I really think that, has the zoning commission had any look at this? Probably not, because it's always been for the rivers, and that river just died recently.
Doug and I had an agreement, and I want to emphasize the agreement we did have.
I don't remember saying a thing.
We did have an agreement that an economic consultant, a new economic consultant, would be a good idea.
Absolutely.
All right, but I think where I go from there is that what we do in the north end, be it industrial or retail, the decisions we make on zoning, I think would emerge from those economic studies that give us a clue as to what are the markets, what are the industries that are working in today's reality, the economic reality we're in. So, to me, getting to the core fundamentals is what's the economy we're in, both nationally and for Oregon City, and then all of these other decisions about how we flesh out and amend the urban renewal plan come from that base information about what the economy is right now. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, we did have that agreement.
Okay. Cherish those rare moments.
Well, I call tonight a success.
That sounds like a consensus to me.
Well, I think I thought I saw some shrugs of shoulders there. I think we need some professional analysis of certain areas in the city, and I think that is correct. And I think that's, you said an economic consultant. I don't know. I don't think we need an economic consultant to Main Street, frankly. Main Street's in my opinion, is a success story. But I think there are areas in which, in fact, we just don't know what can practically be done. And from that standpoint, I think we're in agreement.
You know, we have a great school at Portland State University with a great department in urban planning and urban development, and we have some great professors there that are capable of being bought to come in and work with us and bring staff in.
Remember the ethics training.
I'm telling you.
Hey, it wasn't in the back room, Dave. Come on.
This is where we actually take advantage of the fund, their expertise to come in and help us look at Oregon City. And I think that there are some really wonderfully talented people there that it's just like this team. We've got a team here, and we should be using all of the resources we have available locally. And if we have to pay these people some money to come in and to help us bring their expertise or bring some of their graduate students in to be participants in doing a lot of legwork, we should be using every resource we can to have people who are on top of the subject at our giving us everything they can.
I would agree it's a great resource. However, I think they were involved in the State of the Centers publication that Metro put out, and my recollection is they said that the Oregon City Regional Center had something like 175 jobs in the center. Well, I think we've got about 170 businesses in the Main Street area alone, so I'm sure we have more than 175 jobs in our Oregon City Center. But no, it is a great resource, and I agree with you. It's one we need to tap into. But I think they would be very good in terms of some very focused questions. I don't know that they would be the kind of consultant we're talking about in terms of an actual economic evaluation of the lands we're speaking to.
Well, there's two commissioners, and there's going to need to be more than two.
Actually, I have a question. This is a work session. Can we actually vote here?
No.
We're not going to vote.
And maybe a comment I made before. I think that if you're looking at revisiting the economic development strategies that are at the city level. This is a city decision.
Yes.
That's right.
I believe. I hear what you're saying, Jim, and I think that the connection in the down waterfall to these projects is undisputable. So first of all, I would, think about who's going to make this decision. You're not making decisions tonight, so think about who's going to make the decision to revisit. And then secondly, I think that the Urban Renewal Commission does have a job, which is, what do you want to do in the meantime? If you decide you're going to commission, well, I don't know where you get the money, that's not my problem. But don't forget that you have programs and so forth going on out there. You might have other opportunities that walk through your door. You've got a recently freed up development site that has been offered. What are you going to do while you're working on this process? I'm not negative or positive to the process. That's not my job. But think about what you guys would be doing.
I would like to see us take a fresh look at the relationship between the Cove and the Oregon City Shopping Center again. I know it keeps coming up over and over again, and I think there might be an opportunity there, and I'd like to see us explore that opportunity.
Would you, if I might, you might want to wait until after October 1st to explore, because they do have certain
Well, I
rights
guess,
that
it's never too soon to start planning. But that's, if you're talking about specific projects and what we're going to do in the meanwhile, I'd like to look at that. I'd like to look at leveraging energy credits, perhaps for, I don't know, and there's also some metro programs. I don't know if we can leverage some dollars. But I'm looking at this, it's called Financial Incentives, Community Investment Tools, put out by Metro. It's a Community Investment Toolkit, Volume 1. And they've got these recommendations for things you can use. There's a thing called a vertical housing program. They talk about TIF and local improvement districts. They've got some success stories, transit-oriented development, tax exemption. They've got brownfield assessments and cleanup funds. I think there's also the EPA programs and incentives that might come into play. So specifically, those are the projects I would like to see us work on this year.
Yeah, Metro is.
So, in 5 minutes.
Not that I have any opinions. Institutionalized parking use in downtown Oregon City makes it very difficult for us to really have a redevelopment policy or plans that actually make things happen. We need to solve downtown Oregon City parking problems by creating a really parking structure or some real off-street parking. Until we do that, and this is an area that we could bring together our urban renewal might, our planning and private partnerships and people to work with us, but we could start the ball rolling. The off-street parking lots that are now currently being used are really poor utilizations of those properties.
We do have a parking plan.
I know, and that parking plan institutionalizes the lack of development. It stops redevelopment from happening in downtown Oregon City. That parking plan was fine in theory, but in long-term practice, we need to solve the problem of that eliminates the need of those parking lots being used the way they're being used, and where we really create something different.
I think that in the parking plan, it creates what we do is we assign a parking manager that brings together all those parking lots and tries to manage them together,
But do we want those parking lots to be parking lots, or do we want commercial buildings and residential buildings, or do we want to create a set of dominoes that really create new activity, new blood, new thinking? And right now, that parking plan institutionalizes just what you say, a parking manager making those parking lots stay exactly what they are. And I don't find that that's acceptable.
In terms of adding buildings downtown, we really need the market to be driving that quite a bit. That's what I understand.
But we as an urban renewal district can start priming the pump and changing the dynamics and be working with partners such as Metro, such as TriMet, and these people, they could become natural partners with us and creating something that could really change what we're doing.
I was going to say, if you don't think we've been not partnering with Metro, you're wrong.
Well, I know that we have, but we can do better.
Well, the thing is, for example, on the existing parking lots, I don't think there's anything that precludes us to building up over those parking lots.
And actually, that was the concept.
That was the concept. Yeah.
Was to do the wedding cake thing.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that was part of the vision.
But that's 12th and Main is getting off the dime, hitting the nail on the head. Let's start. Let's bring together the plans that acquire the KFC property, find out if we got a willing seller, and develop the whole property into something that's positive in multiple levels of significant parking, and commercial and residential or whatever a private investor will build on top of it. But let's take the bull by the horns and start making something happen.
That sounds like a project to me.
It does. Sounds a lot like a project.
So what do you want to do next? I mean, you want to take a break? You better.
We got a commission.
Yeah, we got another meeting.
Study session of the commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
1 minute.
I'm going home. So that's what next. Going home. No, but it seems to me that out of this, you decided that you want, and you guys are going to have to take this up as to how and who. But let's say, number one, look at update economic development. I'm almost hearing assumptions. I mean, say economic development strategy based on reality, right? Is that fair? Yes.
Based on current economics.
Yeah, because the last one wasn't based
Yeah,
on myth.
reality
It was
is-
based on the reality at the time, I guess.
Okay, that's fine.
Different to everything.
Current economics, okay, and so the questions there are
I'd say
who, when,
Not where.
city versus urban renewal. Okay, but that's something that it sounds like people want to look at whether they want to do this or not. You haven't all decided you want to spend the money on it yet, but it's something you want to look at. Okay, you want to look at criteria for spending TIF, right? And that means making those public investments, okay? And I made it really broad on purpose, so it's not just the big projects, it's anything else that you want to do. You want to settle on, by consensus, how you do business, right?
Thank God our city commission is not a partisan.
So those things popped out at me.
Well, I'd like to maybe broaden what Paul's been putting forward. Put emphasis on North End, and North End Main Street is what we're talking, North End development. That excludes the Cove, but I think we all know what we're talking about when we talk about North End. And And that, I think your parking concerns are kind of addressed in looking at that in more detail.
Really taking advantage of our assets that we have.
Right.
And focusing on this as a, let's show we can do something, let's do something now.
Right.
Win.
Well, and part of that, I suppose, would relate back to a concern that there might be a bad taste in developers' mouths about Oregon City, so here we go, we're going to do
I mean, we got the
something.
good taste from the Main Street program, and this
Yeah,
builds right
okay.
on the Main Street program.
Main Street,
Get to the,
and I don't know which project this is in your plan, but
Whatever
do
wins.
project for a win. Now, you obviously have adopted a budget for next year. So you have some stuff that you already believed you were going to do, and I don't know whether any of it, fits into any of
We
these
call it
things.
contingency. I'm not kidding, actually.
Well, I mean, this one, I think this is part of your plan. You guys have a project here. So you're talking about allocating some of your money in some way to make something happen. So is this something you would instruct, I mean, you need to think about how you're going to do this. And that probably relates back to how do you do it. Okay. Anything else? I mean, when I'm saying next, I mean like tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. Because, I mean, this one's huge. Because, everything that Jim said is absolutely correct. If you change the fundamental basis for your economic development strategy, you will change the rest of the waterfall. So, if you're going to do this now.
Jeanette, I want to mention one thing to the commission. And I'm not really making a proposal tonight, but the city commission passed a downtown circulation plan, and in that plan you have, I think, 3 different alleyways that are identified for closure. And we've recently had a conflict between 2 downtown businesses, one in the Bush building and one in the Orton's building, about the closure of the alley. And that alley that's there, that between those 2 businesses, is one of the ones that the city commission's plan calls for us to close. And so when you think about wins or things that you could do on the ground with your urban renewal funds, one might be that the staff would bring forward if you were amenable to us even presenting it to you. And that would be to look at design solutions for those 3 downtown alleys, and then maybe even a hardscape dollars for actually constructing one of them, which would help me put out a fire down there between these competing businesses, but it would also help implement the council's circulation study. That would be an example of something the staff might bring forward. It's a fairly small project considering the urban renewal budget, but I wanted to know if we could at least put that on there, or at least not, so I'm not blindsiding you in a month when we come forward and say, what do you think of this?
That wasn't my feeling of what the city commission said. The city commission said the closure of the alleyways to Main Street.
Yeah, this goes to Main Street.
Yeah. I don't think we ever agreed to the full closure of the alleyways because we recognized commercial deliveries would still have to be made, and it was closure to Main Street.
That's what we've actually recognized.
Yeah.
There's not a one-size-fits-all.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
There are multiple needs.
Yes.
And
so how to come up with really very striking, urban design words.
Well, Crandall Rambla has had some preliminary meetings with us and with these businesses and with some of our Main Street folks, and they have done design work in our city already, and I think they have a design solution that's not terribly expensive that would be able to accommodate both the plan by closing it to Main Street, but also allowing part-time deliveries in the back. And that's just an example of the kind of project that you might want to...
I would presume the actual closure of the alleyways is essentially a vacation of some sort.
No.
Or it's public use, I guess.
No, it's still public right away. We would just be dictating what that use is.
It's just what it looks like.
Yeah,
What it's used for.
wouldn't be advising you to vacate that, probably ever. Okay. Alley issues.
Go forth, do good, avoid evil.
Are we adjourned?
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it.
Yeah.